Jesus and followers of Jesus, there's been countless martyrs. Even in today's age, there's still hundreds of thousands of people that are persecuted and hundreds of thousands that are martyred each year. A lot we actually don't hear about. And as one of the sisters was sharing before, was that last weekend we had a nun talk to us, and she was telling about how she was in Venezuela and how she was
Guatemala.
And she was sharing how she was persecuted, and it was so bad. She was tortured actually to the depth of not believing in God. It's something we can't even imagine ourselves. And she says, there's actually 150 countries that people are actually being tortured in the world. That's out of 200, something countries, I think it is. So John 10:10. Does anybody remember what John 10:10? No,
that's John 3:16.
So John 10:10 is
have life to the fullest.
Very close. I have come that you may live, that you may have life
to the fullest.
To live it to the fullest. We're called to live our life. We're called to live our lives to the fullest. We're called to be joyful Christians. We're called to have a fullness of life. And it's all tied in with that self-identity that we're called to really live our lives. So, who is Christ for you?
Peter said he is the Messiah.
Yeah. Peter for you.
David.
Yeah. Sorry? God's love, did I hear? God's Son, absolutely. Great.
He's the Word.
The Word, yes. Anything else? No? Okay, let's have a look. Jesus the Christ. Why does history remember Jesus? Any idea?
He's the founder of Christianity.
The founder of Christianity, that's great. Was it because he claimed to be the Messiah? But there's other characters in history that actually claim to be the Messiah, that people followed. Was it because he performed miracles? There's other people in the world that have performed miracles. Mm-hmm. Even prophets. Elisha, they performed miracles. Moses, he performed miracles. Excellent. Or was it that he divided history? Isn't that amazing that he's the only character throughout all of history, the only person that has divided history in half? Right? We've actually had to change how we date, the dating system for Christ. That's pretty powerful. Most of the people that have ever existed, their purpose was to live. But Jesus' main purpose was actually to die. And his death was actually the mission of his life. It was his fulfillment. It was his peak. And as we can see here, there's a cross crucifix. And that was the fulfillment of his mission. And it's so ironic because to the world it sounds stupid. That someone's mission was actually to die. And St. Paul talks about it being a stumbling block for non-Christians. The cross. He was born in poverty to a mother whose fellow Jews thought that she had fornicated, and fornicated means having sex before marriage. And yet, can you imagine that? A Jewish woman whose all her friends, all her relatives thought she had broken the law, broken, to them it was taboo to actually have sex before marriage, and so she would have been looked down upon. If we look in Scripture, there's a part where Jesus actually, he's taunted by the others, and they call him the son of the woman, which was a taunt, because in the Jewish times, you're the son of the father. So they're actually ridiculing him. family were refugees. They had to flee to Egypt. They had to flee in fear. Jesus was from a humble village called Nazareth. So if this was made up, why would someone take such a terrible background? Why would they have the king of the universe born amongst really smelly animals? You know, in the trough the animals actually eat of. Jesus is named in that. That's what the manger is. Could this really be made up? Jesus was a dynamic speaker, and his personality drew followers. It drew 12 disciples. He had an extraordinary authority that people saw. They recognized his authority. He was also down to earth. He could relate to the rich young man, as well as the outcast, to the prostitute, to the lonely. The outcasts were, for example, the woman that was bleeding, hemorrhaging. She was an outcast. She was untouchable. Her own family couldn't live with her. And the lepers, exactly. Jesus, he reached out to those outcasts that everybody else had actually thrown away. He said, get out of my life, you're unworthy. While Jesus is saying, you are worthy. He was so intelligent because he outwitted the Jewish leaders at the age of 12. He was opening up the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, and explaining it to them. And people were so amazed at his teaching and his words. Jesus is unique. Of Jesus, there's countless martyrs, hundreds of thousands of people that are persecuted, and hundreds of thousands that are martyred. And as one of the sisters was sharing before, was Venezuela, and how she was
Guatemala.
Tortured actually to the depth of not believing in God. There's actually 150 countries. That's out of 200, something countries, I think it is. So John 10 knows that.
No, that's John 3:16. Have life to the fullest.
Very close. I have come that you may live our lives. We're called to live our lives to the fullest. We're called to be joyful, and it's all tied in with that self-identity. Who is Christ for you?
Peter said he is
Yeah. Sorry? God's love, did I hear?
the word.
The Word, yes. Amen. Okay, let's have a look. Right. Why does history,
Christianity.
the founder of Christianity, that's great, actually claims to be Messiah, that people follow? Isn't that amazing that he's the only character throughout all of us? Right? We've actually, most of the people that have ever existed, definite death was actually the mission of his life. That was his, there's a cross crucifix, and that was it. That someone's mission was actually to die. He was born in poverty to a mother who's yet, can you imagine it? A Jew, all her relatives thought she had broken. She would have been looked down upon. If we look in Scripture, there's a part which was a taunt, because in the Jewish times, your family were refugees. They had to flee to Egypt. They had to flee in. So if this was made up, what really smelly animals? Jesus was a dynamic speaker, and he was also down to earth. He could relate to the woman that was bleeding, hemorrhaging. She was an outcast. He reached out to those outcasts that everybody else said, get out of my life, you're unworthy. While Jesus is saying, because he outwitted the Jewish leaders at the age of 12. He was opening up the Testament and explaining it to them. And people were so